Welcome back, once again adventurers, to Let's Play Chaos Head. And in the last episode, Momose, Ayase and Yua were trying to make their way through the ruined streets of Shibuya when they were approached by none other than the maimed but still living Nanami Nishijo, having been released in exchange for Rimi's captivity, courtesy of Genichi Narose. And meanwhile, Takumi Nishijo is only just starting to come to grips with what has unfolded. When I came to, there were thick clouds overhead. At some point, day had dawned, but I couldn't see a blue sky anywhere. It seemed dispiriting, an oppressive sky. To be honest, I kind of have the same feeling whenever the sky is obscured by great clouds like these ones. Far away rang the noisy sirens of a number of ambulances and fire trucks. Perhaps not all the roads have been shattered, but I wouldn't hold my breath. The shapes of helicopters circling high into the air came flying into my field of sight. There were an awful lot of them swooping around, almost like a swarm of flies. My head throbbed, like road construction was being carried out inside my skull. It was a more severe pain than what I'd felt during the previous earthquake. I attempted to recall what had happened immediately before my memories died out. The whiteness of the sky, the words Shogun had shouted, the third melt. Tolerating my headache, I roused my body and was dumbstruck. The 107 building is completely and utterly shattered, along with everywhere else. The scenery I knew so well was gone. It was similar to the imagined spectacles of Y2K that had been all the rage about a decade ago. Shibuya had collapsed. Now, of course, interestingly enough, the events of Y2K unfolded somewhat differently, courtesy of the events of Steins;Gate, but I digress. Traffic lights, roadside trees, a number of buildings, all lay fallen. The famous Jumbotron monitors around the pedestrian scramble were all cracked and silent. Well, Takumi Nishijo, in a very real sense, your earlier wish has kind of come true. You wished for chaos to envelop Shibuya, you wished for something to come along and pretty much shatter the entire locale. And rather ironically, Genichi Narose has bestowed that wish. The roof over the stairs descending to the subway had caved in, burying the entrance. The Yamanote Line's overhead railway had come crashing down, and the rails on the tracks had snapped. And many, many people lay everywhere. Blood and scraps of flesh clung to the wreckage, many of them killed by the falling debris, and possibly others died by the psychological onslaught of Noah 2's third melt. People who didn't so much as twitch, people who moaned agonizingly, people who screamed help at the top of their lungs. And indeed, many people were screaming and shouting in the distance. People covered in dust who crawled around with their entire bodies pure white. People who held those lying unmoving and wept. The smell of blood, and the smell like something burning, and the smell of dust hovered in the air. Somewhere distant, several plumes of black smoke rose like signal fires. If one didn't know better, one might compare this to the events of World War III in 2036 via the alternate beta world lines in Steins Gate Zero. But of course, there is no war between nations. There are no soldiers running about here and there. Instead, all this was brought about by the machinations of Genichi Narose. This was the might of Noah too. I had chills. There was nothing to separate it from a weapon of mass destruction. I finally had a real sense of why Shogun had been so desperate to stop it. Be that as it may, however, I doubt anything can undo the tragedy which has unfolded. Speaking of which, what had become of Shogun? Coming back to myself, I looked around. A twisted wheelchair had toppled over close beside me. Next to it lay his small body. Hastily dashing over, I pulled him up in my arms. I honestly don't think he can hear us. He didn't react when I called out to him. I couldn't hear his inner voice either. Surely he wasn't dead. I would reply that he most certainly is. Even if he wasn't killed by Noah 2 in the third melt. The last vestiges of his lifespan have clearly run out. I put my ear close by his mouth. He was breathing, albeit faintly. So he's hanging on by a thread, but a very slim one at that. But he wasn't conscious. I tried lightly swatting him in the face and such, but he wouldn't wake up. Given his gaunt frame and his constitution, Shogun isn't going to be waking anytime soon. Without knowing that, I couldn't so much as go to rescue Rimi and Nanami. I should have asked Shogun beforehand. Unfortunately, it's too little too late. Clicking my tongue in irritation, I took my cell phone out of my pocket. I doubt we're going to get a signal if the towers have been destroyed. But it was out of power and remained unresponsive no matter how much I fiddled with it. It wouldn't do me any good. So the batteries did as well, on top of everything else. Was there anyone besides Shogun who seemed likely to know? Think about it. You got to think. There is one person that comes to the front of my mind who would be gunning for where Nozomi and Noah 2 are being kept. However, whether or not she's in a forgiving mood remains to be seen. You don't have time to dawdle. While you falter like this, that Narose guy might have killed captive Rimi on a whim. That he might. Who? Someone who would probably become my ally and who was well versed when it came to Noah 2. But regarding my earlier sentiments just a moment ago, Takumi isn't entirely defenseless anymore. He has a D-sword in his possession, so he can defend himself against retaliation, and the fact that he does have a D-sword of his own will probably mean that the certain someone who knows above all else where Noah 2 is will actually have no choice but to join forces if we are to take out Genichi Narose.
君たちは特別な存在だ。
A flashback to Kozue and Hatano there.
中でも一番特別なのは、その目、誰の目を産み落とした少年。
畑野一世。
Not the person that I was thinking of, but He too would know. Senna's father, one of the initial members of Project Noah. His whereabouts were currently unknown. It's going to be the equivalent of trying to find a needle in a haystack. But I was of course referring to Senna Aoi herself. I'd never met him. No, we might have had a near miss. I think you saw him. Yeah, you did catch a glimpse of him once before. According to Kozupi, he appeared here and there in Shibuya looking like a homeless person.
見つけるしかない。
Indeed, there is nothing for it. I picked up Shogun's startlingly light body, carrying him on my back, and began cautiously walking through the ruins. I had no idea where Hatano-san was. Even so, all I could do now was to look for him. However light Shogun may have been, he was still a little under 50 pounds. I didn't have the stamina to walk around Shibuya carrying him, especially not with the roads so jagged and even. Unfortunately, carrying him in the wheelchair is probably out of the question. Anyhow, there were no prior instances of me having gotten any proper exercise since sitting in front of my PC was my daily routine. I thought I ought to take Shogun to the hospital, but with Shibuya in this state, I doubted I'd be able to call up an ambulance. The only way to go, then, is forward. It wore me out just to climb the side of Dugan Hill. I ran out of breath and huge amounts of sweat came pouring out all over me. Wiping off the sweat on my forehead, I paused to collect my breathing. Well, if we'd come here moments ago, we might have run into Momose, Yua, Ayase, and Nanami. Unfortunately, they're in a bit of peril themselves. Then again, they might be closer than we think. And someone's faint voice came into my hearing. It was very lonely, but by no means on the brink of despair. A singing voice that comforted me as I listened to it. We can't stand around listening to Ayase's singing forever. We need to find her. I heard the singing voice before. At the time it had come from atop a concert stage, in the midst of excessive lighting that stimulated my sight and deafening sounds that seemed to shake the tight closed space itself. I had heard her. And now in the middle of the road, absent any human presence. I accidentally skipped ahead there. Laying Shogun down where I stood, I surveyed the area. In terms of human forms, all I could see were a number of corpses lying prone. That's because she's not on ground level. In fact, she's under it. Doing my best not to look at them, I searched for Ayase. Where on earth had I heard her singing from? In front of me was a caved-in street. A huge hole opened its jaws there. I remembered right the subway ran beneath this road. While thinking to myself that it couldn't be, I tentatively looked down from the edge of the hole. It was about 5 meters deep. A vast amount of small debris had piled up inside. You need to get down there ASAP, Takumi. Ayase lay fallen there, and she is not alone.
匠。
今助けるよ。
No time to waste. I hastily jumped down the hole. I messed up my landing and pretty much fell head over heels down onto the wreckage. Ayase's leg was pinned in place by a huge hunk of concrete, and she couldn't move. I tried to somehow get it off her, but it was heavy and would be impossible to take care of alone.
私だけじゃない。
Indeed.
他に3人いるわ。君の妹も。
ナナミが。
Why was she here? Wasn't she supposed to have been captured by that man, Narose?
ナナミ、ナナミ。
Pressing my bodily pain, I got up and tried shouting, but no answer came. When I looked around, in addition to Ayase, I saw a stout woman lying prostrate on her stomach. She wasn't moving, but she didn't seem to have any external injuries, so she probably just lost consciousness. I spotted neither Nanami nor the remaining person. It was possible they'd been buried alive. I had to do something fast. I took a glance up at the hole. Dust flew around, enough to send me into a coughing fit. Beyond it was a circular cutout of the sky. I thought of Shogun, lying where I'd laid him on the road. I thought back over Rimi's words.
妄想をすればするほど、本物のあなたの命が削られていっちゃうんだ。
But I couldn't let myself hesitate. As the old saying goes, desperate times calls for desperate measures. And there is one way to get them out. But, well, there is a price to be paid for it. I pulled my D-sword out of invisible space. I sat next to Ayase, looking into her face in such a way as to avoid seeing her leg. I gazed only at her eyes. That was enough.
妄想するんだ。
Powerfully.
綾瀬の足の上にある瓦礫は大きなものじゃない。数は多いけど一つ一つは小さい。重くない。簡単に足を引っ張り出せる。他の二人も助け出せる。
Ayase and I. If we two Gigalomaniacs achieved shared recognition of that delusion, which will almost certainly be amplified due to the fact that Takumi now actually possesses a D-sword of his own, in tandem with his own Gigalomaniac powers. The delusion should become reality of its own accord. And there we go. For the first time in a long time, a delusion of Takumi Nishijo's own accord. Suddenly Ayase smiled in what seemed like relief. Her fingers gently stroked me on the cheek.
グラジオールの導きね。君がここに来てくれたのは。
It wasn't Gladiol that brought Takumi here. It was Shogun. I blinked and warily raised my face. The enormous chunks of concrete on top of Takumi's leg had transformed into a bunch of tiny debris, just like in our delusion. Once we moved some of it out of the way, Ayase could withdraw her leg. Certainly hadn't dreamed it would go this well. Pushing herself up, she rubbed her ankle. Luckily, she didn't appear to have any major injuries. We need to press on and find Nanami.
綾瀬の歌が聞こえたんだ。それに導かれたんだよ。
そう。よかった。歌い続けてきて。
As I lent Ayase a hand to help her stand up, I surveyed the area.
ナナミは
Probably further beneath the tunnel. As before, I didn't see my little sister anywhere. Had our delusion failed? Or else was Nanami already? I grew anxious. There is a voice, another voice, a familiar voice. When I looked in the direction it had come from, I discovered a hand extending from the ruins. I seized that hand, its slender fingers, and peeked in through the ensuing gap.
Oh.
We meet again at last, Yua Kusunoki. A tunnel-like crevice. Buried alive at the bottom of it was a familiar-looking glasses-wearing girl. It seemed like a long while had passed since the last time I had seen Yua. Indeed, it has been a long while.
なぜか急にこの隙間ができて。
Yeah, Yua's not up to speed on the whole gigolomaniacs making delusions reality thing.
ついさっきまで全く身動きが取れなかったんですけど。
She said apologetically, averting her eyes from me. There'll be time for that
Theo.
later, however.
しっかり掴んでて
I gripped Yua's hand tighter and pulled as hard as I could in hopes of dragging her out through the crevice. Ayase helped as well. When the two of us pulled at Yua's hand with all our strength, she escaped the wreckage rather speedily.
ありがとう。ござい。
Although her body was covered with dust, bits of concrete were stuck to her long hair. Yua didn't seem to be injured either. That's 3 people rescued. There is one more. That left only Nanami. Leaving Yua to Ayase, I searched for Nanami. Considering the fact that Yua had been able to work herself free, my delusion must have taken effect well. If so, it should be possible to rescue Nanami from a crevice or something like Yua. Unfortunately, that delusion doesn't account for the fact that Nanami's right hand has actually been physically severed from her wrist, and the fact that she has lost an incredible amount of blood. As expected, while I looked around in a number of the wreckage heaps, I saw Nanami's face in one of the cracks there.
ナナミ
I called to her, but Nanami didn't react. She appeared to be unconscious. I reached out a hand to touch Nanami's shoulder and momentarily hesitated. The form of the Nanami who had turned to particles yesterday and dissolved before my eyes flitted across the back of my brain. The Nanami before you, however, Takumi, is the real McCoy. This Nanami had to be the real Nanami. I took the plunge and grabbed her Nanami's shoulder, her blouse. I succeeded in distinctively touching her there. Her warmth was there. I pulled her out with all my strength in the same manner as I'd done with Yua. Unlike Ayase and Yua, Nanami wore bloody clothes. Her arm in particular was pure red. For the time being, I laid her on her back and checked her breathing. It sounded painful, but she let out slight exhalations.
よかった
She may be alive for now, but unless she gets medical treatment soon, she won't be. At this point, I was most worried about the condition of her blood-drenched right hand. When I tried to hold it, to examine it, my own hand passed through it. A right hand that is solely the delusion of Nanami Nishijo, unconsciously so. A delusionary hand. Nanami's right hand had really been...
ごめん ごめん巻き込んで。
Something tells me that she was going to be involved no matter what you did. But, in a sense, you did bring this upon yourself. And her as well. Groans spilled forth from Nanami's mouth, her dust-coated face, and I softly brushed her on the cheek. Nanami's eyelids slitted open. Line of sight wandered for a bit before her eyes took hold of me.
ナナミ
That instant, Nanami's expression crumpled, contorting. Great big tears overflowed from her. She clutched hard at my hand with her left hand. She murmured as if to cling to me. I shook my head a little as I answered.
ナナミの本当のお兄は僕じゃないよ。
The time has come to reveal the truth about who and what Takumi Nishijo truly is. But meanwhile, we are in the mind of none other than Rimi Sakihata herself. But that is going to be the end of this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Head, and when we return, who knows what cruel experiments that Genichi Narose will be using Rimi for, to power No 2 and to lure Takumi Nishijo right to his doorstep. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.